Ollie studied theoretical physics at Warwick University and is currently doing a master's in quantum infringements and entanglement. That's Greek to me, but...
Latin,
okay.
actually.
Latin, yeah. Okay. Ollie, go ahead.
Why am I here today? I don't have the wealth of experience in the church that other people do. I'm relatively young. And when you talk about rewinding the clock back 40 years, that means I haven't been born for about 14, so I'm a bit scared of that. As Gwendoline remarked in The Importance of Being Earnest, there are times where speaking one's mind ceases to become a duty, but instead becomes a privilege. And if I'm very honest, when the Constitution was first published, I was incredibly delighted. Finally, I had written proof, documented evidence that contained within these sacred pages was a confirmation of our very strong suspicions that the church was being led by incompetency at a very high level. And I find that quite fun, if I'm honest. So when it first came out, I got to work. I studied the Constitution as best I could with the short time and limited insight that we've been given, and I, like many of you, came to the very quick conclusion that there was something very wrong with the Constitution. I could sit here for hours, literally hours, given the amount of satirical gold they've given us in this, pointing out the individual deficiencies and propose ways to solve them, but instead I'll try to go a little bit deeper and a little bit more central to the core of what I believe to be one of the biggest deficiencies of the Constitution, the process and, more importantly, the culture which led to its creation in its current form. I'm going to talk about the purpose of its creation and the purpose it fulfills now that it has been created. So I feel that at this point, a definition of what is a constitution is not necessarily relevant. A constitution is pretty much dictated by its purpose and the establishment that it serves. So it's often unuseful to generalize. But in general, constitutions have a few defining features. This is taken from the preamble of the Cheon Constitution, the very first page. The Constitution is enacted to establish the laws, principles, and guidelines that serve all people of Cheon and guide them so that they may embody the word which true parents have revealed. Amazing, right? It's a very standard democratic constitutional phrase. It's something that we've all, happy to read in there. In a democracy, the Constitution is a constitution of a function of the people, because the people exercise their sovereignty and, through voting and things like that, and as a result, the people decide the rules and principles that they want their government to follow. This is the way that constitutions work. However, the fact that citizen rights, as prescribed by the Cheon Constitution, for instance, the right to hold elections, directly contradict other sections of the Constitution where everybody in a position of power, including government and media, even in relatively low positions, are all appointed by their superiors and not by the citizens themselves. Despite there being a whole chapter, admittedly a very short and incomplete chapter, dedicated to how the electoral process will be carried out. This is just one of the very many basic examples why this constitution cannot be compared to a democratic constitution in terms of its purpose and function. It does not serve to limit or distribute power away from individuals. It's very much a consolidation of power and a consolidation of influence. It does not serve to uphold any existing law. To quote the Constitution itself, it supersedes all other laws, and as the Constitution is has direct influence over all the cosmos, according to the Constitution, then that includes all cosmic laws. It does not serve to protect against corruption or the consolidation of influence. As was said before, the Supreme Council members have direct control over all law, all media, all financial assets, all rights of individuals, and all positions of leadership. Powers which no small group in any democratic nation have, barring, of course, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which I'm sure we can all agree is not actually a democracy. Because it can be seen to be following none of these defining traits and hallmarks of a democratic constitution, we can come to the firm conclusion, very systematically, that the purpose of the Cheon Constitution and the purpose of a democratic constitution are firmly misaligned, despite the obvious attempts, such as the inclusion of democratically aligned clauses and phrases that try to make it appear otherwise. So I'm going through and comparing it to documents which we may find relevant in order to kind of try and find the purpose of the Constitution. So the next obvious comparison that we can make is between the Cheon Constitution and the Code of Canon Law. We had a discussion, several people via email, and this was one of the defining points. They said you cannot, the Cheon Constitution is in fact an embodiment of canon law that has been adapted to our purposes. Canon law, for those of you who are unaware, is a body of laws, much like a constitution, adopted by the ecclesiastical authority of the government of the Christian organization and its members, most notably the Vatican and the Catholic faith, of course. There are obvious similarities here between the Cheon Constitution, and it clearly borrows quite a lot from canon law, but there are many, many differences. For the sake of time, and because probably most of you have not read canon law, because it hasn't maybe had as much of a direct influence in your life as, say, a democratic constitution has, I'll try to keep it to one point. The Code of Canon Law is a honestly beautifully written document, previously composed of 2,414 articles, or canons, that were later condensed in the 80s to 1,752. It consists of 7 large books written throughout the Christian church history by some of the world's finest legal, theological, and pastoral minds. Now, historically, canon law is the oldest continuously functioning legal system in the Western world, and it tries to serve one goal. As expressed by the final canon of the code, the last line, canon 1752, having before one's eyes the salvation of souls, which is always the supreme law of the church. This is the purpose of canon law right here. Now, although obviously it has some ugly flaws, especially ones that have come to light within recent years, it is essentially a document that is serving the people of the Catholic faith. That's its purpose. And I truly believe, honestly, that long ago it was the intention of the Cheon Constitution. It was also the same. If you read it, you can see that there are skeletons and faded footprints of those values instilled still within it. But here's honestly what I think has happened. This is why I think it's in the state that it's in today. Canon law is incredibly long, complex. People study it for years. They consult special canon lawyers. In order to attain that title, you need a PhD in canon law or something very similar. And what I can see has been done is a very messy condensing of canon law, like a bad haircut, kind of chopping off all the bits that you deem unnecessary and embellishing it with shiny, distracting, pseudo-democratic clauses and phrases in order to kind of sell it to the Western world, if you will. Maybe I'm being a bit cynical here. But to be honest, when you are going through that process, which of course is probably something we need to go through, why cut the important nuances about pastoral care and preaching the word of God and the means of proper education to the next generation from the Constitution, and instead keep all the things about punishment of heretics and the power of governance? Why have some been taken out and other ones been left? The Constitution has pretty much lost the essence of why canon law was written, and it fulfills just a shadow of its previous purpose. Now, there is one more document which I'd like to bring up, and it's something that hasn't been referred to in terms of the Cheon Constitution before, I think, but it's this one here. This is the World of Warcraft Terms of Use Agreement. Blizzard reserves the right, this is the company, Blizzard reserves the right and its sole absolute discretion to change, modify, add to, supplement, or delete at any time any of the terms and conditions of this agreement, the feature of games and service, etc. This is the last clause at the end of a terms of service agreement. effective without prior notice, with or without prior notice. Now, what is the purpose of this document? Now, just to put this into context, this is the clause at the end of a game, essentially, where players online invest a huge amount of time and effort in order to create something which is stored online digitally that has real monetary value and real emotional value as well for a lot of these people. Now, so this is designed to protect an actual asset, a real tangible asset, if you will. It's designed as an emergency measure to give the company legal grounds should something go wrong. It's basically, we have the right to do whatever we want just in case you screw us over. It's a safety net for the company so that it can continue to operate in its best interests. And it's often, the signers of this agreement, of which there are at least 60 million people, it is their job when they're signing this that they have to have faith that the company will not exercise this clause and destroy their game which they love and spend so much time and effort into. They have to have faith that the company has their best interests as well, rather than just the own company's interests. Now, this, I think, is the most comparable document of the three that I've mentioned to the Cheon Constitution. The essence of this document, the Cheon Constitution, is not a constitution, as with a democracy. It's not a covenant, as with canon law. It's a terms and use agreement written to protect the movement from its members. Now, the defining factor of this document...
Sorry, can you say that again one more time? The last sentence?
It's a terms of use agreement that's written to protect the leadership of the movement from its members. Now, the defining factor of this document that many people have commented on over the past week is that it has very, very high levels of security printed on it, granting more and more power and protection the further and further you go up. And that is essentially what nearly every single chapter of the document is designed to do when read in this light. The purpose of the Cheon Constitution, if it's not its original motive, then this is the purpose that it fulfills very, very well. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would just like to express my disappointment that you gentlemen have not previously referenced this document in here. Okay, thank you very much. Fahad, right?
Hi. This isn't the main thing I came here to say, but just want to reply to Ollie here. Some extra bits of information. So one thing is I work in a job where I get people to sign many of these kind of agreements every day. And of course, many companies write that. And the company I work for does have a lot of information about you and about, well, whoever signs their agreements. And so people do trust those companies a lot. You're right. And they do write those kind of words at the end of it. Like if you just go and, let's say you've got an iPhone and you do a software update, it's a 30-page agreement that you're agreeing to. And there's bits almost verging on this. But of course, it's not true. Basically, it's not true. Companies are not sovereign. They have to be under national laws. And, that phrase there is verging on illegality because we have a Sales of Goods Act in the United Kingdom, for example, that protects you, that you can't just change the game because that's not what you wanted to buy. So there is legal redress. So people can write things, but it doesn't matter what they write because it can't be protected or supported or enforced. Which brings me to the next point, which is that also, Cheon, maybe people might write constitutions. We would empower the constitution by following it. But, we don't have to. And, I think it was very important for providentially to have a nation because any sovereign nation of the world, even if I think about it, let's imagine one nation right now, some medium nation decided to, for some obscure reason, which I hopefully will never happen, God forbid, but decided to, kind of destroy our movement, let's say. So it would be very, very tough for our movement to fight against an entity which has got billions of dollars of income, which has got laws, which has got judges, which sees itself as able to kill you if it wants to, because it can have a judge which orders your killing. So I'm just just to take you out of your comfort zone. We're sitting in this room in Lancaster Gate, in this corner of Europe with 300 million people. You know, EU, it's out of 7 billion people, 350 billion, and then there's the Americas, a few hundred million. But that's not the whole planet. So I'm just trying to make a bigger picture. That the Constitution could be seen to be unimportant. It could be seen to be destroyable. Our whole movement is almost destroyable. So that's why maybe it's not so important what's written, those kind of phrases. Because at the end of the day, anyone who's a member of our movement presumably does believe in God or a higher power, and presumably does think that there are things that supersede it. And the word canon is taken from, it was actually Arabic qanun, and then they brought it in the Middle Ages to Europe, and they tried to make some laws. And the bits that you were looking at is just a very recent bit of it, the last 200 or 300 years of it, yeah. But of course, this isn't a new debate at all. So in a way, when I look at this debate, it's like a baby is starting to take a few steps. But these discussions have been had many, 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 many times in history. But just as I guess our intellectual level and spiritual level have grown, the discussion is being repeated on a bigger level, let's say, But this is not new at all. And many countries, Israel is a country that has a Jewish kind of identity, yet it wants to be democratic. So it faces this issue, the pull in two directions of, are we religious, are we secular?
But I believe it is quite new in our movement to have an engaged membership who discuss and take some responsibility for their own direction and future and their communities and assets. So
in our movement, yeah, but our movement is we're supposed to be just the fruit of thousands of years of history. I'm representing my ancestors, etc., etc. So we're just seeing this minute right now, but I think none of this is new. I just wanted to throw that in. And the terms and conditions not so important.
Well, of course not.
I almost want to say, who cares?
Well, the thing is, personally, I care quite a lot. Because, yes, it's fine once you are an established member of Cheon. I, unfortunately, am not. I'm not blessed. I don't have a family. If I want to get blessed, if I want to be a family, I need to be a citizen of Cheon. That is absolute. Now, unfortunately, there are clauses like this. You say this clause is irrelevant. There are clauses like this at the end of every single section of the Cheon Constitution, basically saying we have the right to do whatever we want. We have the right to see all this stuff that we've written here. We have the right to ignore that and change it. Every single section, apart from one. And that is the amendment section, funnily enough. So yes, actually, it is very relevant to me, personally.
Yeah, you're right, but...
Okay, maybe we can just get some questions from Peter. Did you have a question?
Yeah, could you say a few words on what you felt was the culture leading up to the forming of the Constitution?
Okay.
You were saying.
Well, for instance, you'll probably see a little bit better in the video coming up. But the way that the Constitution was written was there were several people consulted. There were Japanese and Korean church leaders, obviously. There were elder Korean members. There were Western legal experts. So see it clearly, they value the Western legal and political systems. And then they invited also True Children were consulted very heavily. And they invited people from the West, I believe. Uncle Mark Brand from Britain went, Uncle Jack Corley from Britain went, maybe two from America. And they, over the course of 2 days, they were given their chance to speak, and they spoke a lot, and they saw lots that were wrong with it. And all of those things that were wrong, they flat out ignored, because the Western people thought they were going in there to write a constitution whose purpose was to govern a nation and govern an organization in order to conform to the Western ideals that we're all used to, the ones that allow us to be sitting here today and actually have a critical discussion. Now, unfortunately, the ideals that were actually put in place when creation of the Constitution was done were not those ideals, and I believe they were ideals of protection. And I want to protect what we have now, rather than I want to develop into a nation of Cheon, which was originally stated. Sorry if I didn't make that clear in the actual thing.
Does anybody else have a question for Ollie or any of the panel?
Oh, that's something completely different.
Okay.
Somebody mentioned something
If
about
you could keep
Cheon.
it to a question rather than
Yeah.
a speech, then.
Sorry. No, someone mentioned about Cheon. I was there a few years ago, and they offered me a job to work in the Ancestor Liberation Office, and I spent quite a bit of time there. And, I noticed that this thing about, I really like what Graham said, by the way. I noticed this tension between returning resurrection and pay a bit of money, and 7 generations get liberated and then blessed. And then I brought it up with people who worked there, and somehow it wasn't an issue for them. And I was thinking, am I just too much thinking? And they don't care, they don't think, unthinkingly they're following. But then I realized that actually there's such an emphasis of studying divine principle in Cheon. It's a bit crazy. I mean, we went through the DP book twice, and no one is shy about reading chapter 5, which I used to enjoy quite a bit, which is returning resurrection and all that. So the furthest I ever heard anyone ever mention about DP being somewhat watered down was, in our movement ever, is that when they said, Father's words are able and divine principles came. That's the closest I ever got to anyone ever saying that. I've never heard anything more than that. So I don't see a push for that in Cheon at least, or anywhere else, to remove divine principle. Just wanted to throw that bit of information in.
Okay. And going back to something that Graham referred to earlier, I was in Albania for 7 weeks last year, and I think many people might be shocked to realize that since going back as far as 2005, the Albanian church has grown no more than the British church. Because what they tend to do is they have a very low retention rate. Within 5 years, most people leave. So when they do give reports to Korea, they only give the reports about the people joining. So the actual number of membership hasn't changed since 2005. And it's that kind of like localizing on results that can create a false impression. And in fact, the 2 most effective people in the entire country just quit the whole country just recently, moved to Vienna. Robert and Marinella Stefank, who are amazing, amazing leaders. And they, in frustration, they've just left. So, all right, I think.
Well, that's part of the reason. Okay. Being their ex-director, that's only part of the reason. There's a few other positive points.
Well,